Thank you. Jane mentioned the National Education Union. Let's talk about its thinking, get inside its thinking with General Secretary Kevin Courtney, who is on the line now. Kevin, good morning.
Good morning to you.
So there's been some progress, as we heard in Jane's news bulletin there, on industrial disputes in other sectors. So a nurses' strike has been paused, but your strike is still as planned going ahead, and the government says it can't negotiate with you unless those strikes are put on hold. What's it going to take for you to call them off and get back to the negotiating table?
Well, we're ready to be back at the negotiating table this morning. The government could negotiate with us despite the strikes coming up. That's their decision not to negotiate. Amal, we first wrote to them in July about this dispute. Our first strike, we've only had one day of strike action, was on February the 1st. This letter they sent yesterday was the 21st of February, 3 wasted weeks. And our problem is the same day they sent us that letter, they also gave us in public their evidence to the school teacher review body. And they're suggesting there a 3% pay rise for experienced teachers for September this year. But Q3 inflation estimates are above 10% on RPI, above 6% for CPI. That would be another significant pay cut. The government needs to indicate that it's going to move more than that if we're going to be able to call off the strike action.
Okay, I mean, you're union leader, I totally understand that, and you've been set up to fight for your members, and you yourself, I should say, have spent many years as a teacher doing your best to help children, often in quite vulnerable communities. But what would you say, Kevin, to the millions of parents in the north of England, themselves often very hard up because of the cost of living crisis, seeing their energy and food bills soar, desperately trying to keep their heads above water, and the one institution that they could depend on was the local school. But now those schools might be shut and they might well lose a day's pay as well because they have to stay at home to look after the kids. I mean, this is going to have a huge effect on people, and it comes at a time when many, many young people have had a huge impact on their education because of the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, those points are good points, and we do sincerely apologise for the disruption in education our strikes causes and for the disruption to home and working lives of parents. We sincerely apologise for that. We don't want to do it. But the way we see it, there is disruption in children's education every day. There are special needs support assistants who are leaving schools to work in supermarkets because the pay's better. There are GCSE chemistry classes without a teacher qualified in chemistry, GCSE maths classes being taught without a teacher qualified in maths, primary classes where we can't have permanent staff, a succession of temporary staff, all doing their best. But it's disruption in children's education every day. And we think that we are standing up to the government saying you need to invest in this generation of children. You can't leave these things off for 5 or 10 years. This generation of children need investment in them.
These are chronic issues, which we've often talked about on this programme, and there's no question that teachers are, without doubt, amongst the most hardworking and important people in our society. What is hard, I guess, for some people to understand is how is going on strike next week going to help fix those problems?
Well, it's only been the strike action that's got the government even to talk to us. As I said at the beginning, we first wrote to Nadim Zahawi when he was Education Secretary in July. We wrote to Kit Malthouse, to James Cleverly, to all of them. We didn't get in the room to talk about these things until we were on the verge of winning our ballot. There's been no movement without the threat of strike action. So it's important to us that we keep the pressure on the government to make a change for this generation of children and for the people who work in their schools.
You've got your convention this weekend. Will you put the latest government offer to your members?
We've got a national executive, coincidentally, this Saturday.
Yes.
And what we've said, what Mary and I said yesterday, Mary Bousted, co-general secretary, and myself, we said we didn't think there was enough in what the government has said for us to call off the strikes, because the letter that Gillian Keegan's sent us doesn't even say that they're prepared to talk about pay for this year and to put funding into schools, because any pay rise we get absolutely has to be funded. Otherwise, it just leads to more cuts in schools. We don't think there's enough there. We've invited Gillian Keegan to write to us to tell us more, something that we could put to our executive on Saturday. If she writes to us, we'll put it to them.
All right. Kevin Courtney, General Secretary of the NEU. Thank you so much for joining us.